going on, everybody? This is the 11th episode of the Armchair Army podcast. We have an awesome guest today. His name is Cale Michael. He is an NBA insider for nbaleague.com. So we'll pick his brain about some NBA, some OKC Thunder, some Cavaliers, the Celtics, and their 12-game winning streak, and all that is the NBA. We also have a special edition of a chair draft, and then we go into our regional roundup with good vibes, bad vibes as well. So it's going to be a packed show for you today. Let's roll. I want to welcome a very special guest to the Armchair Army podcast. His name is Cale Michael. He is from nbaleague.com, and he knows everything there is to know about some NBA. So we're going to pick his brain a little bit here. So, Cale, how are you doing today?
Doing pretty good. Ready to talk.
Awesome, man. Awesome, man. So first, I wanted to kind of pick your brain about the NBA rookies. So there's been a lot of talk about Lonzo Ball and Markelle Fultz coming off the bench. What is your, I guess, overall view of this draft class? Are you ready to call it a bust? Are you going to wait a little bit for him? What's your thoughts?
I'm going to hold off on calling anybody a bust right now. Obviously, the Tatum has been performing like really well for the Boston Celtics. Lonzo just had a triple-double, so he's kind of coming into his own a little bit. Donovan Mitchell has been a really nice surprise for the Utah Jazz, even though he's been coming off the bench and he had a struggling first couple weeks from three. Fultz is the only one that you could even really consider a bust at the moment, but that's only because he's had the injury issues or whatever's wrong with him. So the Sixers kind of leading him into coming off of the bench for a little bit, maybe starting Jared Bayless while they still run Simmons at the one because he's playing the point guard for him most of the time. Which the argument there is him coming off the bench. It's probably good for the long run, especially if he is injured and they need to work him back into the rotation. I do think Ben Simmons, though he is considered playing the point guard for them, he still guards the small forward most of the time, unless it's like he's playing Giannis when Giannis plays the point guard occasionally.
Right.
So all the top heaviness of the draft, a lot of people like Zach Collins is playing okay for the Trailblazers. I mean, but he was picked 10. Nobody expected him to be a star, especially not right off the bat. So, like, the top three picks, Tatum has been really solid through the first couple weeks, month, whatever of the league. Lonzo's had his on and off nights, but like it's a young team. It's not a very good team, so he's got time to develop. Fultz is the one that's the big question mark, and then people like Donovan Mitchell and I can't really think of any others off. Like Bam Adebayo for the Heat has been pretty solid in rotation minutes. So nobody comes to my mind as a bust right now. Fultz being the only question mark. So I'm going to give him a pass.
That's one thing that people don't understand is these kids are coming. I mean, most of these guys are just first-year guys coming out of college that were just one-and-done guys. So they really only have 1 year of that really high-level basketball under their belt. And so I've seen so many articles that are just like ready to call these players out, and it's like, man, you got to wait for these guys, man. They're 19 years old, they're 20 years old coming into the league. So especially with Lonzo, I know he has such on and off nights, but it seems like he is exceeding expectations as of right now. Mm-hmm. They had him side by side with Jason Kidd, and I know that's way early, but
it's similar. It is similar to Jason Kidd's first year. So
very similar. And Jason Kidd was shooting like 11% from three-pointer, I saw, in his first 15 games. And Lonzo is crushing that. So
yeah, he's shooting like 35.
Exactly. So you got to give these guys time. So I actually wanted to talk about Giannis, though, and the new addition to the Bucks with Eric Bledsoe. Is that a good addition for him, or is it going to be a troublemaker like he was with the Suns?
I'm actually pretty high on Bledsoe, not from his days with the Clippers because I think they misused him a lot. Didn't run him off the bench. They used him as the 2 guard because back then the Clippers had a small forward, but they did not have a shooting guard. So that problem kind of switched later on when they just couldn't find a good rotational small forward. So they had a ton of guards. The issue being with Bledsoe in Phoenix. Phoenix is not a very well-run organization as of now. They were previously well-run, but they've just never had all the things line up for them. They've been tanking. Last year he was playing really well, but they shut him down because they wanted to start tanking for draft picks. Back when Goran Dragic was there and they signed Isaiah Thomas, it was really confusing about why they did that. Obviously, all 3 of those guys are gone now. Mm-hmm. So just the mismanagement of how they used him and who they put around him. I mean, the best piece he had last year to play with were T.J. Warren and Tyson Chandler.
Right.
And Tyson Chandler is a good centerpiece for a team. But if he's your 3rd best player on the team or the 3rd most consistent player on your team, you're having issues. So him going to Milwaukee is going to end one of 2 ways. I talked to my buddy Colin about this. When this trade happened, because both of us predicted it would happen one way or the other, which I actually thought the deal that Milwaukee got for him, it was a win for Milwaukee. I think it was also a win for Phoenix in terms that they're going to get that pick eventually unprotected if it keeps being protected.
Right.
So 2021, I believe, is when they can have that completely unprotected pick. So who knows what the league's going to look like then. The Bucks aren't stable yet, so we don't know. But Milwaukee, for what they gave up, this is definitely a steal for them, and you can't regret doing that. Greg Monroe was going to leave in free agency most likely. They hardly played him. This frees up minutes for their logjam down in the post. John Henson and Don McCurr are going to get more minutes. And Teletovic is going to get, I guess, more minutes. I don't even know if he's playing. I haven't watched much Bucks since the first week. So we'll see how that logjam clears itself up over the course of the next couple of weeks while Bledsoe's being integrated. But their depth at the guard is now a lot better. They can run Bledsoe and Brogdon together because Brogdon's going to probably come off the bench once Bledsoe's integrated to the system. And that's a really good defensive court. They can throw Giannis down to the 4, and then they can put Middleton at the 3. Middleton can play with Bledsoe, which I assume is going to be the starting lineup. I assume Dellavedova's minutes are going to go down. He's been playing pretty solid for them, better than he was last year. But I assume he's going to kind of be the last guy off the bench for them now, kind of scrappy guard off the bench behind Teletovic and Snell and all those guys. So if they do end up running 10 deep, I don't know if Kidd prefers to run 10 deep or 9 deep, whatever rotation style. So we'll see. But I think it's a home run for them, especially for what they got him for. Now, it's either going to be really good for them or really bad. I don't think there's going to be a middle ground here. So I'm leaning towards it's going to be good.
It seems like it's mostly that way with NBA teams in general. It's just they're either feast or famine all the time. And the Phoenix Suns are the perfect example of that because it seems like they almost have a good team. Like Josh Jackson and Devin Booker being there, it seems like that would end up being a really good deal for them. But they just have not been able to make it work with the addition of veterans and getting draft picks. So, yeah, that's a great take on the Bucks. And moving on from the Bucks in going to OKC, they've been another storyline that we've been keeping track of with Russell Westbrook leading the charge, and Paul George and Melo just not clicking. And at one point they're 0-5. I think they dropped another one. They're 0-6 in Western Conference play. And are they going to figure it out, you think?
Well, you're talking to a dude who lives in Oklahoma City, so I go to a ton of Thunder games.
Okay.
But looking at it the way I have, Westbrook is taking his role as a less as the alpha dog and more as a playmaker seriously. He's been showing that he can still do it, or that he can kind of resort back to being a playmaker and distributing to all these guys. Adams has been really good. He's a little banged up right now, which is really bad because the Thunder have no backup big men after trading Cantor. They're starting Johnson, the guy that they drafted out of Kentucky in the second round, I think, and running Patterson at the 5 a lot, he's undersized, but he can play the 5 and he stretches the floor pretty well. Roberson is still having his shooting issues. They're not getting consistent play out of all their wings. Abrinas has been pretty good. Grant has been pretty good. Huestis has been pretty good. All three of those guys are really, they need to pick up their play for this team to be great, but they're kind of on and off. One of them will be good and the other two will be off, and then vice versa the next night.
How much onus do you put on Billy Donovan for that and not gelling with this team?
I don't know about gelling because obviously bringing three superstars together, one of which had complete run of the team, one of which was in a disgruntled situation in New York where he was the face of the franchise, the fans were with him, but the ownership wasn't. And then Paul George, who wanted out of his previous franchise. I think the issue lies with trying to find a happy medium. Obviously, I'm not a fan of the rotations that Donovan is doing. I don't like how he's spreading out the minutes between Melo, George, and Westbrook. I would prefer if he ran all three of them in the starting lineup because Melo doesn't want to come off the bench, which I think is a mistake for the long term of his career. But we'll see where that goes. I think the three of them should start. Instead of putting Melo with the second unit for instant scoring, he should stagger Melo and Westbrook together with George with the second unit because George is more of a playmaker. Because they're relying so much on Raymond Felton, which Raymond Felton, despite looking really out of shape, is kind of a happy medium between stocky and speed. So he's able to use his bigger body that he built up, which I don't think it's a healthy body to begin with, but he's able to use that to kind of shove around the bigger guards that are taller than him. He's a good playmaker. He can shoot, but if he's like their seventh best player, which isn't good for the lineup. So if you're relying on him to be a playmaker off the bench with Melo as your go-to scorer on the second, who else are you relying on? Because it's just Abrinas, Grant, Huestis, Johnson now. When Adams comes back, Patterson's going to be in that rotation, back with the second unit, I'd assume. It's really, I think a lot of it is on Donovan to try and find out the rotational pieces, but they really either need to make a move to get more depth down low, which I'd assume they try and swing for Greg Monroe, but I don't think they have nearly enough cap space to do anything with it. So they're probably going to be one of the teams that are looking really hard at buyouts when those start happening. For maybe a Luol Deng if the Lakers end up buying him out because he can stretch down to the four, maybe to any of the big guys that get bought out. If Tyson Chandler gets bought out by Phoenix, that's a good option for them. So it's a matter of they need to shore up their depth or find something that works rotation-wise. Donovan probably has another month before the question really starts to fall on him because, as we saw, Paul George is kind of clicking with Westbrook. Melo has his nights, but he's been a little off recently. I think the issue is finding a good spot for Melo in the rotation where he's not fighting for those shots with George and Westbrook, who look like the best two, the two that are clicking.
Exactly. And that is so interesting, too, because it seems like this OKC team has the most interesting dynamic of all NBA teams because they have this superpower team, but they're all on one-year contracts except Westbrook. So do you think that, I mean, even if they are competitive at the trade deadline and things like that, that they might go to the Lakers or they might go to the Celtics and say, hey, George and Melo, they're available, and they go for the long term instead of – because do you see Paul George and Melo staying there past this year?
The issue would be with George. George is the one that I don't think Melo is going to stay. I think Melo is too big of a personality for OKC. We don't really have a lot of big, like, primetime stuff going on here in OKC. So I don't think I think it's good for a little change, maybe a little revival of his career, but he's going to go to a contender after this, like a straight-up contender in a bigger city. George is the one that I could see staying. He's already said that he's going to keep his mind open, which gives that worth a grain of salt, I guess. But
right.
If the team is really good, if the team makes the playoffs, if they make the second round, maybe if they make the Western Conference Finals somehow, I don't see that happening with how deep the West is and how dynamic some of the other teams are compared to the Thunder. I could definitely see it happening, and if Melo leaves, that frees up a lot of cap space that they could use to re-sign George. That means they have two max contracts. They have $20 million in Adams. If they really need to, they can move Adams pretty easily because he's pretty big. He's a pretty good big man. Some team would take him. He's got a little bit more than I'm trying to think of he's got a little bit more than DeMarcus Cousins on his current contract. So I think he's at 21 this season. DeMarcus might be at 18. I'm not sure. So we'll see if they're going to end up moving him, try and just shore up the backcourt with people around, just around George and Westbrook. If he stays, George, it's kind of a coin flip at this point. They have to perform. He's not just going to stay if they make the playoffs. That's not a thing that's going to happen. I think the real question is everybody's going to wait to see where LeBron goes. That's kind of what everybody did with Gordon Hayward this year. Everybody waited for Gordon's piece to fall before they started signing, because once Gordon signed with Austin, that kind of opened the floodgates for everybody else.
Exactly. You can gauge where you are and everything like that. Especially, it's just going to be this team. This team is so interesting to watch in the Thunder just because they have such a crazy dynamic. It's almost like a trial run. And if it goes well, they'll stay. If not, they'll blow it up. But even if they're doing well, it seems like OKC has so many assets now. They can only go up from here. So that's really exciting for them. And I was just looking at Brad Adams, his doing with the Celtics and him doing well there. They're on a 12-game winning streak, I believe. I think Kyrie is crushing it even with Hayward out. What do you think is going to end up? How is it going to end up in the East? Are the Wizards going to be that top team with the Cavs? Are the Cavs even going to be there? What's your feeling in the East?
My feeling in the East is I'm really confused about the Pistons and the Magic with how they're doing so well. I think the Magic are kind of evening out a little bit. They have a decent starting lineup, but their depth isn't there. Their money is mismanaged. They're not going to be able to really do anything to bring help in to try and make a deep playoff run. The Pistons are a little more interesting because Drummond has been really, really good. He's fixed his free throw shooting. I think he's shooting like 72% on like 20-something shots, something like that. So it's really impressive what he did with that. Reggie Jackson has been playing the best ball of his career so far. Tobias Harris is looking like an all-star. I mean, their depth has been pretty decent. Stanley Johnson is still a bit of a disappointment. I mean, this is given that I've only watched a little bit of Pistons ball this year so far. I'll probably tune into a little more because I like watching Tobias Harris play. So Johnson has been a little bit of they don't know what to do with him in the lineup because he doesn't really do anything other than defense. Kennard has been okay. Henry Ellenson has been okay. We get to see more Boban, and Boban's been playing pretty good. So it's a pretty deep, solid team. Anthony Tolliver and Langston Galloway, both who were signed, I believe, from the Kings during they left the Kings and signed with the Pistons in free agency, have been really good for them off the bench. So, and they have really movable contracts. They have like $6 million in Ish Smith that they can move for a pick or for bringing in a big contract. I think it's funny that they're in the best position to trade for Greg Monroe if they wanted to, but I don't think they want to because that didn't work out for them the first time.
Yeah, second trip to Detroit would be awesome.
Yeah, I don't think they're going to do that. So yeah, that's been the surprise. The surprise has been the Pistons. I mean, obviously I'm a Celtics fan. So this 12-game win streak is insane, especially last night. Last night we had no business winning that game. Our bench just rallied behind Al Horford, who was the best player in that game last night, and just took it to the rafters. So I mean, Al Horford is looking like he's playing probably the best ball of his career, and he's 30. Gordon Hayward's out for the year. Kyrie broke his face. He's questionable for I think tonight or tomorrow against the Nets, and I don't think I think we're still gonna beat the Nets purely because Al Horford just means so much to just the entire team that if he's there, I think everybody plays better. Tatum and Brown did really well. I didn't see Tatum's line. I think it was like 12 points, 10 rebounds, something like that. But Brown had like 15 points, 7 rebounds, 5 assists, 2 steals, and 2 blocks. I mean, if you're getting that kind of production out of your young guys around, and Smart playing lockdown defense on D'Angelo Russell, I think the streak might go to 13, and they're going probably with Kyrie back with a mask into or I don't know if they're playing at Golden State, but they're playing Golden State.
Is this the second time that Kyrie's had a face injury? He wore a mask a couple of years ago, was it?
I don't know if he wore a mask. I know LeBron wore a mask. But
LeBron wore a mask. I swear that Kyrie's had a match.
He might have.
Too.
I don't know. He gets
like
in there a lot, so he might have gotten elbowed in the face a couple times.
Yeah, seriously. So I'm even just looking at the standings right now. The Cavs are 6-7. They're deep in the East here, and there is good East teams. I know that, of course, we're 14, 15 games in the season, so you have to take all of this with a grain of salt. But at the same point, the Cavs. It worries me that the Cavs are bad right now because they're only going to get worse for them. It seems like with how old their team is with injuries, and they have to stay healthy. And I don't think Dwayne Wade or Derrick Rose can stay healthy all 82 games. And so if they get in a spot where they need to win 5-6 games in a 10-game stretch at the end of the season, that's really going to hurt their playoff chances.
For sure. I'm thinking that that tweet or that whatever that LeBron tweeted out, I really do think the Arthur Fist or whatever the meme that he sent out on Instagram, I really do think that was in regards to the Eric Bledsoe trade, because they were in a position where they could have gone and gotten him, especially for what the Bucks gave up.
Right.
They had a second round pick they could have thrown in. They could have traded away Channing Frye's contract. I don't know who else they would have had to include. Probably J.R. Smith, maybe, or Iman Shumpert. At this point, I would trade J.R. Smith before Iman Shumpert. I know J.R. Smith has more of a chance to bounce back with his shooting and everything, but Iman Shumpert has been playing pretty good for them. He's probably their best perimeter defender, and they need that. So I would have done everything in my power to do that trade. Maybe add in somebody else's contract and try and bring in Tyson Chandler too. He would have really helped their locker room and stability. Just looking at that team, their best player off the bench right now is Jeff Green, and people were criticizing them bringing him in during the off season because Jeff Green, since he left the Thunder, he went to the Celtics in that trade that brought Kendrick Perkins to the Thunder, and ever since in Boston, he was really wishy-washy. He's averaged good amount of points, averaged some rebounds, but he's just so wishy-washy. Doesn't know what he wants to do on offense. He can't really defend at the 3 or the 4. But he's been the best player for them off the bench, which is really sad. So, but if he's there, if you can get solid production out of Jeff Green and Dwayne Wade off the bench, which I'm sure Dwayne will get it together if he continues coming off the bench. I just don't know that just waiting for the buyout. They don't have anything to offer any team for anybody that can provide a significant boost to them. I really think it's a coaching situation. I think they need a better coach than Tyronn Lue. I don't think LeBron can carry this team. I'm not going to say that they're not going to be able to turn it on in the playoffs, but their defense is way worse than it was last year. And the only thing I could possibly see is them trying to trade Kevin Love to get something back, and that something's probably going to be 2 guys that aren't as good as Kevin Love but could shore up the depth. So I just don't see where they could. I don't see a situation where they can get significantly better before things start getting worse. And with how good the teams at the top, well, I say good. They're really, the Raptors are looking kind of confused about where their identity is now. The Celtics are the only really good team in the East right now, and that's without their second. Right now, they've only got Al Horford holding down the fort for however long. I don't know who else is at the top of the East. I mean, the Pistons right now, they look really good, but I don't know. We need to see them hold that up because we haven't seen anything from them the past couple of years.
Right.
The Raptors,
and they have no playoff experience.
They got swept by the Cavs a couple of years ago. So, and Reggie Jackson was there and Andre Drummond was there, but most of this team wasn't there. Tobias Harris wasn't there, and he's their best player right now. So, looking at it, the Raptors are probably going to get better. I don't know if I trust the Wizards' depth going forward. They have Kelly Oubre, who's been really good. Otto Porter's been really good, and that the starting 5 is really good. And then they have Kelly Oubre off the bench, and that's pretty much it. So I just don't trust that depth going forward. The Celtics are the best team in the East right now, but I don't know if that's just a regular season thing. I don't know how that's going to work in the playoffs. So it's really going to be a question of who holds up the longest. I think when the trade deadline rolls around and we see what trades get made, I think by the time the trade deadline rolls around, we're going to see who the best team in the East is before the trades happen at the deadline. So.
And it seems like as the season progresses, it gets more and more clear, obviously, as teams start trading for players. Teams obviously start tanking and wanting draft picks. But overall, it's the East is absolutely nuts. And Cleveland's always been that mainstay now, and it doesn't look like it's going to happen this year, which is good for the Celtics, because if the Celtics can make the NBA Finals without Gordon Hayward, that's got to be such a confidence booster for the Celtics.
Yeah, I can see a lot of people don't want to. Obviously, we're like barely at 1/8 of the way. We're a little over 1/8 of the way through the season, so you can't really start talking about that yet. But looking at this team now, the depth that the Celtics have, the versatility on the wings that they have, and the rebounding that they've had, I think they're 13th in the league when they were 26th last year. Just the improvement there is a really good thing. So if Kyrie and Al Horford can stay healthy, I think that this team has a chance to beat Cleveland. That's the issue, is going to be who they faced before Cleveland, because they're obviously not going to play each other in the first round. I think Cleveland's going to get it together and at least get a top 4 seed, if not a top 2 seed, because they're going to have to pull it together at some point, or things are going to get blown up real fast. So the question is, if the Celtics meet the Cavs in the conference finals, will LeBron dominating? Because that's not going to change. He always dominates no matter who's on the team. KG could be guarding him, and it didn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
If LeBron dominates and Kyrie goes and dominates because they don't have anybody that can guard him, they'll probably shove Shumpert on him, but that doesn't matter. Will somebody like Kevin Love, if he's still on the team, or whoever they bring in, maybe Dwayne Wade has a vintage performance? I just don't think they have anybody on that team other than LeBron that could just completely destroy them, unless they just shoot them out of the gym, which I don't think this Cleveland team can do. There's just so many versatile defenders. The rebounding is going to be a lot closer than it was last year. The Celtics have done so much to negate the advantages that Cleveland had, even with Kyrie, and now Kyrie's on the other team. So unless Isaiah Thomas just comes back and is doing what he did last year, which I want to happen because I really like Isaiah Thomas. I love what he did for the Celtics, and I really want him to succeed and get the money that he deserves. But he's basically going to be a 3-month rent. If he comes back in December, he's going to be like a 4-month rental. So I don't know if they're going to bring him back. If LeBron leaves, they're definitely not bringing him back. They're going to start tanking again.
Right, and I think the addition of Isaiah Thomas is going to be huge down the stretch for him, especially for that depth. He's got a couple. Does he have a couple more months, or does he got a couple weeks?
I don't know. He's been warming up with the team, and he looks like he's well above schedule. December. I think December is when he's going to come back.
And that will be really fun because those Christmas Day games are always a blast.
Yeah.
So that'll be
the real issue with Cleveland is Jay Crowder's been exposed a little bit. I think that Dallas was okay throwing him in because they didn't really need him. He wasn't starter quality for them. And then over his 2 or 3 years in Boston, he improved a lot. But last year, while most of the Celtics fan base, it was about a 70-30 split who liked Crowder and who didn't like Crowder. I was in the boat that he was okay, but I wasn't buying into him being starter quality because despite his shooting percentage saying 40%, a lot of those shots were weird. His defense wasn't what everybody was hyping it up to be on Twitter and everything. Avery Bradley is kind of coming into his own in Detroit now and proving that he was a good defender on his own, not just in Brad's system. But Jay Crowder hasn't shown that he's a good defender in Cleveland. So if I was a Cavs, I'd be kicking myself in the foot for not trying to get Avery Bradley instead of Jay Crowder. Now, I don't know if the $2 million difference between Jay Crowder's contract and Avery Bradley's contract would have made that much of a difference and wouldn't have made the money work. But if I was Cleveland, I would have gone for Avery Bradley just out of sheer, both of you can walk next summer, but Avery Bradley's clearly the better player. So Jay Crowder's just been not great for them. So, and they've been running him a lot at the 4, which isn't that great either. It doesn't look good.
Right, and with the 8 points per game, I mean, he's not a contributor on offense, and like you said, he's shooting a lot worse than he did last year. His numbers are way down, but I appreciate all of the insight on the East and the West here. We are actually going to go into our chair draft, where this is actually our new segment. It's called Chair Draft, and we are going to do a snake draft. This segment is going to be about our 3 most annoying players that we did not like. It can be past, it can be present, but chair draft, you can vote. You can go first. What is your first pick in the draft?
We're drafting personalities, right?
Personalities, yep.
If we're talking players, past and present, my favorite player of all time is KG. So I'm gonna go with him just because of his attitude towards the game. I really like what he brought to the court and just toughness, kind of the swagger he walked around with no matter what he was doing. So even back when he went to Minnesota again in the last year of his career, I really liked what I saw, just what he brought to the team no matter what team it was. So I'm gonna go with KG for his toughness.
Okay, I like that. So I'm actually going to. You got me thinking now. I'm going to go with his counterpart. I love Paul Pierce. Paul Pierce was always that guy that was even keel. He was always on the floor when you needed him, hitting the big shot. He had that big personality. When they won the championship in Boston, it was so fun to watch that team go with KG and Ray Allen and Regional Roundup. All of those guys were absolutely awesome. So I'm going to go with Paul Pierce for my first pick. It's your turn, second pick.
Okay, I'm going to take it to the booth now. We're going to go past players that more than a couple years out of the league. Let's go. I want to take Booth Shack. I'm leaning towards Booth Shack just because of just how funny he is. But I think I'm going to go with Kenny the Jet Smith. I like that. I think I'm going to take him just because of how he looks at things. You've got the toughness of KG and you got the analytical mind of Kenny. So I think I'm going to take Kenny because of how he looks at the game, how he breaks things down. I think he sees things a little differently than most people.
I like that. Okay. I'm actually going to go with, I'm a little Northwest bias here. I am going to go with Gary Payton. Watching him as a Sonic, man, I loved it. And when he was kicking balls into the stands and getting ejected, still loved it. He was just brought that mentality that he is going to mess you up every single night. And he was so intense all the way through. And watching him and watching some of those games where he would score 40 points and have 15 assists. Like those were awesome. And he wasn't a very good shooter, so he was a good driver. So it was really fun to watch him play, and his personality was larger than life. So I'm going to go with Gary Payton.
Okay. Let's see. Is this the last pick? We going
last pick of the draft.
So I got KG's toughness. I got Kenny's analytics. I'm thinking KG's got the trash talk. Kenny's got the smarts. I'm trying to think of who would kind of even that out. I'm thinking somebody goofy like Shaq could bring it together. I think I'm going to go with who's some of the goofies. I think I'm going to go Robin Lopez.
Oh, okay, I like that.
I'm gonna take the goofier of the Lopez brothers. We're gonna go Robin and his goofy nature, his fun-loving personality.
I have to say, when they were both at Stanford, it was funky watching them play. Like they're just two gangly dudes that can ball it up. But yeah, Robin's definitely the worst of the two, but he can still mix it up pretty good. I'm actually going to go to the booth as well. I have Paul Pierce, I have Gary Payton. I'm going to put a bigger personality than both of them. I'm going to go with Charles Barkley. Charles Barkley would be the mesh to make them go. So I got Paul Pierce, Gary Payton, and Charles Barkley. You have Robin Lopez. You have Kenny's Jet, and who else? And
I got Kevin Garnett.
I like it. All right. Well, Cale, I appreciate you coming on the podcast, man. Greatly appreciate it. And with all your NBA insight, we'll have to get you on later in the season once the playoffs start rolling around. But thank you again for being on.
Thank you very much, man. You have a good one.
You bet.
Huge shout out to Cale Michael for doing that for us, coming on the podcast from NBALeague.com. Great insight on some Oklahoma City Thunder, some Celtics, what the Cavs are going to do moving forward. So great insight from him. And without further ado, we are going to get into some regional roundup. So let's get started.
Regional Roundup.
All right, we are going to get started with some regional roundup here. So first, we always start with Washington, and we are going to stick with it. UW went to Stanford and lost. We called it on the podcast here. Friday night away games are the toughest games, and also best games to bet on as well. So if you're looking for a really good bet, Friday night away games, even though you can throw out all the rankings because it's absolutely nuts. You saw USC go to WSU and lose. You saw Clemson go to Syracuse on a Friday night and lose. It's just those Friday night away games that are so tough for teams. So keep an eye out on that if you could ever bet on those games. Those games are the best to bet on. But we are going to stick in the state of Washington and go to WSU. WSU has a bye week this week. They're coming off that win against the Utes in Utah. They beat the Utes 33-25 in Salt Lake, and Luke Falk looked pretty good. He had a couple of interceptions, but they should shore it up before their Apple Cup game against the Huskies in Seattle. They're going to have a bye week, get healthy a little bit, and then rumble on into Seattle, so that will be a really fun top 25 matchup. But we are actually going to go to Utah now. BYU is coming off a 31-21 win against UNLV. They have UMass this week. BYU is not going to be bowl eligible, but they have won a couple of games and look to stay on that roll here. And so BYU, and then we already talked about the Utes. They lost to WSU. They actually are playing UW this week. And then Oregon is coming off a bye. They play Arizona this week in Eugene. That should be a good game. Willie Taggart is still trying to keep his head above water, and at Oregon, try to keep the team afloat while Chip Kelly's looking for a job still. So kind of interesting dynamic. I read an article this week that Chip Kelly is looking at Oregon as his next spot, maybe, as well as going to maybe a Southeastern Conference team, but really interesting storyline to keep a hold of, that Chip Kelly, if he ever went back to Oregon, even though Willie Taggart is their guy. So Arizona State as well, sticking with Oregon, they lost to Arizona. Khalil Tate put 49 points up on the Beavers, and Khalil Tate, I tell you what, he is so fun to watch, man, and he is the definition of an October, early November Heisman that you always see, that guy that just starts crushing it in the later part of the year, and it just can't be stopped. But moving into Idaho is coming off that bye. They play Coastal Carolina this week. That should be a really good game. Idaho has to win 2 out of their last 3 in order to make the bowl game. So they're really struggling this year. But Linehan and the Idaho Vandals should have a good showing against Coastal Carolina at home. Coastal Carolina, if you remember, they are the ones that are taking their spot in the Sun Belt. So Idaho has a little grudge match against them this week. But I wanted to talk about Boise State, of course. Being a Boise State alum, this weekend was absolutely crazy. 59-52 at Colorado State. They came back 14 points with 3 minutes to go and beat a good Rams team. They have Air Force at home this week, but Boise State, they were down all game and come back and win in overtime. Really pumped for the boys in blue, and they showed why they should be a top 25 team. Going 8-2 now on the season. They're only lost to WSU and to Virginia, but the Boise State Broncos, they absolutely rolled in Colorado and in Fort Collins. So that is going to be our regional roundup. We actually now are going to move into some good vibes, bad vibes.
Good vibes, bad vibes.
All right, to get started with some good vibes, bad vibes. My good vibe this week, I have to go with Boise State. Down 14 with 3 minutes to go, and Brett Rippon, and getting an onside kick to go their way with 1:30 left to march down the field and tie the game. Absolutely insane. This was so fun to watch, watching Brett Rippon. He threw that fourth quarter pick. I thought the game was over. I wasn't happy, and then they stormed back with that big run by Madison, and then the onside kick recovery, and then in overtime they sealed the deal with a fumble at the goal line for Colorado State, recovering that at the goal line. But completely nuts game, so fun to watch, and you look for Boise State to win the next 2 games, go to the Mountain West Championship 10-2, and then going probably most likely to the Las Vegas Bowl. They're against a Pac-12 team. It should be Oregon. I think Oregon's going to get that last spot there for bowl eligibility. And then going in my bad vibe here, my bad vibe is going to be Georgia. Georgia gets just absolutely dominated by Auburn. Also called this game on the podcast with Jake Fromm going into Auburn. I thought it was going to be really tough for Georgia to win this game, but man, they got shellacked in Auburn, and Auburn showed why they're a top 10 team and top 5 team, quite frankly. And if they could have a good game against Alabama and make that game close, they have a good shot at making this college football playoff. The one thing is they have to make the SEC championship game, which means they have to beat Alabama, and that's most likely not going to happen next week in the Iron Bowl. But Georgia gets the bad vibe of the week for not only losing but getting absolutely destroyed. So those are going to be our segments today for Regional Roundup and Good Vibes, Bad Vibes. I want to thank Cale Michael again for coming on the podcast from NBALeague.com. Super cool to hear him. You can go see his blog as well. He has great stuff on there. But thank you guys for listening. Greatly appreciate it. We will be back with you on Thursday, so don't miss this one. We also have Facebook Live on Thursday, and then if you're on Twitter, we have Twitter Live on Wednesday, so don't miss any of the live reaction. Tweet me, comment me on Facebook. We love to hear your guys' reaction, but that is going to do it for me. You guys have a great rest of your week.